In this video, I'm going to be reviewing the final mouse Starlight-12 in its medium variant. This mouse recently shook the internet, and today I'm going to see if it's truly the best mouse on the market. Let's go. Alright, let's change up the beat. Let's bring up the mood a little bit. So if you guys have not heard, the final mouse Starlight-12 is one of the few mice on the market that is not made out of plastic. It's made out of metal, magnesium alloy to be more exact. This metal is capable of doing things like this, while also being as light as this. Now of course the 43 grams is only for the small variant, but the medium variant is right behind it at 50 to 49 grams, making the small and medium variants the two lightest mice on the wireless market. Now let's talk about them. Starting with the build quality, this mouse has been called out many times for things such as QC issues. Now I've spotted two QC issues on my mouse, but I would argue they're very minor and almost not really issues. But nonetheless, I'm going to tell you about them. So the first thing I noticed was the misaligned scroll wheel. As you can see in this picture, it is slightly off-centered by maybe like a millimeter. Personally, I really feel like it's not worse. It doesn't affect my gameplay performance at all, and it doesn't introduce any squeaking. But I understand that you really don't want to see things like that on a $200 mouse waited months for, but it actually doesn't affect it at all. The next thing I noticed was some wobble that I saw in a Bearded Bob's video whenever you push your button to the side. Now, I tried to get this to naturally happen in game. I put a lot of hours in this mouse. I even delayed the review to break in the mouse buttons more, but it just doesn't happen naturally, and it really didn't affect me in game. This is really just something that happens whenever you force it, which I highly advise you don't force things like this on your mouse. That's how they break. But I understand, just like the scroll wheel, this is not something you want to see on a mouse, regardless of whether or not it happens naturally, but it's not a deal breaker. Now, of course, it's just my unit, and your experience with a QC may vary, but I have to make the review based on my experience. And besides those two small things, this thing is built like a tank. It's metal. Now, next thing I want to talk about is the shape. On the left, you'll see the dimensions for the small variant, and on the right, you'll see the dimensions for the medium variant. Since I only own the medium variant, that's what I'll be talking about. So it's slightly smaller than what I'm used to, but still, I feel like the shape was very good. You could get away with all three major grip styles, probably not palm if you have larger hands. That's more for the smaller hand people. But yeah, in my opinion, I feel like the shape can really accommodate a lot of people. It's not my favorite shape, again, because it's smaller than what I'm used to, and I have other mice that fit my hand better, but this one is still great. And it has noticeable comfort grooves, as you can see right here. Now let me talk about how noticeable the honeycomb and the grooves on the front mouse buttons are. So the grooves on the front mouse button, you can definitely tell they're there, but it really didn't affect me. I was honestly fine. The honeycomb design you can definitely tell is on your hand. Personally, I'm not affected by that, but if you are one to be affected by honeycomb, then you might want to look into grip tape. The next thing I want to talk about are the clicks/buttons on this mouse. This was a pretty controversial subject. So for the legendary drop, they decided to use Omrons. Which, you know, the way they implemented them on this mouse really wasn't that bad. Of course, it's not the most premium thing, and you'd probably expect more for $190. But the most upsetting thing about this is that every mouse from now on, or at least every Starlight from now on, will have kill 8.0s. So it's like, why couldn't they have done that from the start? So it's hard to review the clicks, because the clicks are going to be changing pretty soon, and probably for the better. If the post and pre-travel stay the same, then it's going to mean there's going to be very little, which I really appreciate. The scroll wheel is one of the better ones. It did kind of loosen up the more I used it, but not enough to the point where it's like extremely loose. And I think the steps are defined enough. No squeaks on mine. The side buttons I actually really like. They're nice and big and don't have a lot of travel to them. I think a lot of people can like them. The Omron Switch version does double click a lot, like almost Model O level, and there's no adjustable debounce time. But again, they're gonna use KO soon, so I don't know if that's still gonna be the case. And oh yeah, one last thing I forgot to mention about the clicks is that they do start off heavier than usual. They do break in to get a little bit lighter, but it still stays on the heavier side in my opinion. Now, next thing I want to talk about, one of the more exciting things actually, is the glide and sensor performance. This mouse is incredibly light. It's 50 grams and can be as low as 43 grams depending on the size. The glide is extremely fast, and it has some pretty nice stock feet. Of course, not really as good as core pads or something like that, but very nice out of the box. So yeah, very fast experience with this mouse. The sensor, really to the human eye, it's not that different from any other high quality sensor. No lag or skips on mine. I don't think they really released many technical specifications on their sensor, so we're not exactly sure what it is, but they claim it's the fastest, which is very final mouse of them. But yeah, regardless if the technology isn't as good as something like the Hero sensor, it's still a good sensor, and I really had no issues with it. I heard some LOD issues people are having with it, but I didn't have that here. And oh yeah, unlike other final mouse mice, the polling rate is 1000 hertz. The max DPI you're actually allowed to use is 3200. I'm pretty sure it's not the actual max DPI of the mouse, but since there's no software, you're only allowed a select few. Okay, yeah, that's all the features of the mouse, and now let's get into the final conclusions. I would say the main highlight of this mouse is the fact that it uses magnesium alloy, which is super strong yet super lightweight. The R&D behind that is truly revolutionary and very impressive for final mouse, whether you love them or hate them. And it still has a lot of other features that support this amazing mouse. For example, the shape, the side buttons, the stock feet, the feature kill switches, the scroll wheel, stuff like that. But it also has issues that are just as important, like stock, the price, no software to change the buttons or the DPI or anything like that. But nonetheless, if you factor out stock and price, this is the best mouse in my opinion. The best mouse I've tried at least. If you're into collecting really cool technology and having the best tech, I would 100% recommend you go for the future drops of this mouse. I don't think it's worth paying resale. Resale is kind of crazy for this. If you don't really care for having the best, or maybe you're on a tight budget, don't fall into the hype. I don't think it's worth it. This is really for those those who just want to have the best or really just try the newest technology, with the budget to blow, of course. Now, these are my recommendations as of now. Other companies are probably going to have a mouth just like this in the future. I don't know if it's going to be as cheap, because from what I hear, $190 for this technology is actually kind of good. But yeah, just know in the future, Final Mouse will not be the only supplier of a mouse just like this.